My journey really began with a critical moment that occurred when I was 12 years old. I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in one of the toughest housing projects in the U.S. And my dad was in jail most of my life. My mom, you saw a different future for myself and my sister. And when we were 12 years old, she took us up on this tiny Cessna plane to see parts of Connecticut and Westchester County, New York. And I think that was a critical moment for a variety of reasons, but mostly because it gave me perspective. It helped me for the first time understand that where I was wasn't who I was. And so that sort of colored the texture of the rest of my life. I was fortunate enough to go to a prep school in Connecticut, in Trumbull, and get a basketball scholarship to play basketball. And from there, I just leveraged every opportunity I got and every person I met to get the most out of those interactions and those relationships. I think the way I've approached business and the way I've approached building a company has been, to leverage every single opportunity to learn the most that I can from every situation, so that it can, propel me forward to do better and better things. And that's sort of my progression to law school, and then getting my MBA at Babson. Selling my first company, and here I am today. After that, now having gone back into the fray and with Fixed, and having a fun time. The most significant moment in my life, I would have to say, is February February 7th, 2014. It was the day that we learned that my then 4-year-old daughter had stage 4 cancer. It was a routine pediatrician visit, and the doctor noticed something hard in her stomach, sent us down to get an MRI, and it resulted in a massive tumor that had taken over her right kidney. It was a Wilms tumor, had spread to her lungs. And so she was stage 4. And within 48 hours of that, we were in surgery that Monday. My son was with my mother, fortunately. And we just didn't leave Hopkins. We were fortunate enough to be in Baltimore and to be near Hopkins. And so, that Monday we were in surgery, removed the tumor. After a year of chemotherapy and radiation, she's cancer-free and has remained that way since. One of the most exciting things I've ever done. So the way I've lived my life has been to constantly be unafraid of taking on new challenges. So I think I've done lots of exciting things in life. One of the most fun, I think, was traveling to Moscow as a young lawyer. It was a really boring assignment to a lot of people in the firm, and I think I thought about it and said, this is something I really want to do. And despite the fact that it seemed boring, I'm gonna take the firm up on this offer. And it was a great experience. I wound up being in Moscow for a whole month, and then part of the transaction took us to Central Asia, and so I spent a whole month in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and lived on a floor literally for a month, but learned a lot of great culture, and just saw a different aspect of how the world operates. And I think that was liberating in its own way. I don't know if there are 2 or 3 things. I think I've done a lot of things. There's probably like 15 things. But there are a couple things that sort of come to mind immediately that are things I'm really interested in exploring more. One is becoming a thespian in some way. I've always had this fondness of theater and culture and arts, and if I ever had an opportunity to act in a play or to do something theatrical in that way, I think I would love to do it. I always saw myself as somewhat of a thespian, so I think that would be exciting. Maybe a Herman Miller play or something like that, Death of a Salesman. And I think the second thing is I would love to live abroad. I mean, one of the things that excites me is just all these uncovered, pristine places in the world that no one really knows about, or people don't visit very often, like Easter Islands, where the Moai are. That this just fascinates me, and not sort of central to your question, but I think one of the things that is important is for people to understand is that no matter where you are, you can bloom, exactly where you're planted. And despite the fact that I want to do all these great things, there's some great things right here in Baltimore that we can do together, and that you can see that expand your mind. In fact, I bike to work sometimes, and on my bike ride home on, I think it's Calvert Street, between maybe 21st and 22nd Street in Charles Village, there's a big Moai statue right there in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Baltimore. And so I have these grandiose ideas and visions of living in the Easter Islands around the Moai and all this stuff, but there's a Moai right here in Baltimore. And I think that just goes to show you can expand your mind and bloom exactly where you're planted, regardless of the fact that you haven't been to those places. Well, I think that's one of the most exciting things about Shift is the fact that the organization is founded around a fundamental principle that things should be built in a anti-fragile manner, so that as things happen, they can move and shift with the current of the times. When you think about like earthquakes and earthquake-proof buildings, they're designed to like move and shift with the tremors that happen underneath the ground. And I think Shift is a great organization that is replicating some of that in the world of business, so that as these new political changes, financial change, economic changes occur around the world, your business, your mindset can adjust to those things and continue to create value for not only your shareholders, but for all the people connected to your business. My greatest hope for the world is that we live a more thoughtful, productive life that is based on what we can do, and that more people find a way to ask the simple question of, how can I help? And not only ask that question, but have the true intent behind it to do something about it. There are so many issues in the world. One of the things that I really want to solve in this world is, sort of the environmental challenges that we face because of increased consumption and carbon emissions and things like that. And I think part of that stems from the fact that we're just not a thoughtful, enough species, and we are, that lack of thoughtfulness is effectively leading to our own demise. And so, my hope for the world is that we become more thoughtful, and considerate, and ask the question, how can I help, and actually mean it.